Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today we are going to be going over Path of Exile's game state and kind of go over basically what happened with the game, as a lot of players are upset with the game, but I also want to go ahead and maybe give potential solutions to some of the issues that exist in the game. So the reason why I wanted to make this video is because I'm a content creator that creates content for lots of different action RPGs, specifically Diablo, and I have players all the time ask me, different tips, different things on Path of Exile, because they, migrate from maybe one game to another. And Path of Exile is a very complex game, and it's not very easy for people to hop into. And one thing that people mention a lot, and this is because I stream the game, they're like, what happened to this game? And I kind of want to go over that. So Path of Exile is generally going to be like a 90% plus in terms of its review scores, especially on Steam, because that's where most people are going to be downloading the game, especially nowadays, especially as a casual player, right? I mean, technically it doesn't really matter. The game client is the same, but looking at Steam scores is a very important thing. Looking at it, we have a 49%, and that wasn't too long ago. Now, within the more recent times, it's slowly starting to go back up, but even at 67%, it's still sitting at a mixed review score. And when a lot of people see this, they're kind of hesitant on downloading or trying the game because, well, generally people want to be able to go into a game where people think it's positive, right? Where a lot of people were really upset with the more recent update. And honestly, there's a lot of things that you guys might not experience as a more veteran Path of Exile player that a newer player will have a very rough time dealing with. Depending on your build, mana can be a huge issue, flasks can be a huge issue, and ailment immunity can be a huge issue. And a lot of these got changed on the more recent patch, which makes things very difficult without a different set of tools to overcome some of these things like the ailment immunity, the damage, and the flasks, depending on the build that you play. Now, a lot of people with any action RPG, they may stick with one specific build. No matter what the league is, no matter the update, they like playing that one build. And it might not actually be that viable, as in it got nerfed really hard because maybe they're playing something that relies off of cast on crit, and now that you have to pay the mana cost for that, it just simply doesn't work because you can't sustain it. But I really feel like if you are willing to put in the time, you can make almost any build in Path of Exile work. It just depends on how much time that you put into it. All it really takes for the mana changes is just a few extra passive points. You can get Replica Conqueror's Efficiency, or you can get other things that reduce mana cost. But because of all the other things that we need to invest our points into, specifically because damage got nerfed very hard, it makes it so a new player is just going to be absolutely destroyed once they get to maps. A lot of people didn't even make it to the end game of maps. They just kind of quit halfway through the league. If you check Steam charts, generally how it works with any league, and this is with any game, when there's it doesn't even have to apply to action RPGs. It could be any game, but when there's a new season, there's a lot of people that come play, and then it slowly starts to dip off, and then there's probably a bigger drop off when people are kind of just like, I'm done waiting for the new league, and that's totally fine too. It's not like you lose interest in the game as a whole, but it's just like you've experienced the league mechanic. For me personally, I've already gotten the weapon skin for doing the Expedition League, and that takes some time, and defeating all the 4 bosses, the new bosses for Expedition League, that's what I try to shoot for, and that's pretty much where I feel like I'm satisfied with it, right? I've done the new league mechanic. I got to experience pretty much all of the end game, like Cyrus Shaper, all those things, do Maven, do all of those things, but for the most part, the thing that gets me the most interested in is the new bosses that they do show off. But a lot of people can't even make it to the bosses. I mean, look at the amount of players that even get to Cyrus and Shaper and even do most of the content in the game. This was actually taken a while ago, but it was a 0.1% of players who completed. This league. This was earlier on in the league, but it was 0.1% of the people that actually completed it. Not just this league, just that have that series completed. A lot of people never even get to complete the game. They don't even get to red maps. They're stuck on yellow maps where bosses aren't dying. I'm getting one-shotted. What do I do? And I know it's very frustrating. So to provide some sort of solution, because we lost so much damage, a lot of people are just like, well, screw survivability, I'm just going to get way more damage. And because you're not going to be ailment immune, because a lot of classes like Elementalist, Raider, there's lots of other ones that lost ailment immunity, because before we just got it for free. Now we lost all of that. We have almost half the damage for a lot of different builds. Where do we get those extra you know, sources of damage? Are we just going to have to get awakened gems for everything? Because like the average player isn't even going to get a 6 link, which is crazy. But if you go to lots of different PoE discussions, because I've been watching a lot of the, you know, PoE discussions where Chris Wilson is like kind of talking with the community, which is really awesome. He's mentioning like a lot of people never get a 6 link. I'm like, well, why not just make it easier to obtain some of these things? I mean, like I can show you guys gameplay of like, you know, a lightning arrow with Headhunter and be like, hey guys, there's no problems in terms of damage, right? Like even my Eye of Winter build that I played and I recommend it as like a good starter, and it's really good for relatively cheap. But if I tell someone, yeah, hey guys, we're gonna be doing a lightning arrow build, so one of the first items you need is a Headhunter, most people will never get it. And the thing is it's because it's very, very difficult to get some of these items. People don't know how to farm. You have to have these different third-party applications, Path of Building, you gotta have PoE Awakener trade to really be efficient with this game, and these aren't built into the game. People have to download these. Or if you even look at the point as a casual player for maybe console, why are you gonna get PoE Awakener trade on console? Maybe that's something they could add in the future, but like it's very, very difficult, especially when they have sponsored streams and things like that, where they're trying to promote the game for a new player because maybe they're like, you know, playing another action RPG and they're kind of waiting for something else to come out, or they just want to try a new game. They hop into this, they get absolutely destroyed, and they're like, dude, this game is too hard. I feel like the early game in PoE is very, very difficult, which I actually personally like, but, you know, there's not that many people out there that can go into Path of Exile blind, not knowing anything, that can get to endgame maps successfully. Like, you need to have a guide that is a lot better for most players that are new players that never maybe even played an action RPG. So I think that that can be something to take into consideration. But going over these more recent changes and why players are super upset, I want to go ahead and go over each one of these. So first off, the flask changes. You're seeing my build over here has all my flasks on used when it charges reach full. I love this change, it's awesome. I don't even touch my flask. I'll just let everything be as much as I can have it. Have 20% chance to get flash charge on crit, and then everything else is just used when it reaches full, so I can still sustain during bosses. Or if I use Sniper's Mark, and I can actually gain a flask through that as well. But pretty much what it comes down to is I like the flash changes, even though the flash charges have gotten nerfed. Because I don't have to push the buttons, I love it. I'm okay with it. In terms of, for some builds, yeah, it can be a problem if you need to maintain certain things. But for the most part, I would say this is a nice change. So for me, in terms of the flask, is it a pro or con? I love these flash changes. I will take this any day over the old flash charges where they would charge faster, but you had to push the button. I like this. In terms of mana, I didn't really notice it. Like, I'm actually going to go to like my leveling. This is me playing a Marauder, and mana was kind of an issue with this build, especially earlier on. Like, yeah, you can get replicas, Conqueror's Efficiency, but is the average player at level like 10 gonna get multiple Conqueror's Efficiencies, or just even like one so they can sustain mana? No, realistically, no. But that was a huge issue. Mana is also kind of tied to your damage, right? Because if you're, you know, lacking mana to cast your skill or ability, you're gonna be out on that. So I feel like the mana changes are a little bit harsh, but with a few extra skill points, you can make up for that. And that goes with the ailment changes as well. With Raider, or even technically towards the top of which there's like some source of like ailment duration that you can kind of mitigate a little bit, and that's nice. But most people are probably just gonna get like cannot be frozen on boots or something, or you'll be stuck with Wanderlust right when you get to maps because like you just don't want to be frozen in the game. But a new player isn't gonna know about that. They're not gonna know, you know, you can craft it, and then like on top of that, crafting price is like 1x for cannot be frozen, so it's very expensive anyways to get really good you know, ailment immunity. So I feel like that's kind of an issue with the game in terms of like, you know, that skill points again could kind of solve this. And the damage nerfs, obviously, yeah, with damage nerfs, you get some cluster jewels, you get extra skill points that would help out. And I feel like when I was looking at this, like the whole change, why people were super upset, and I kept on looking at the different reviews for like the reason why at this point when it hit 49%, and it might have even hit lower than that. It's just at the time that I happened to take a screenshot, because this game is not a 49%, even at like, you know, the state where it's in right now, where it's very, very difficult for an average player or even a veteran player that likes to play a very specific build that like they know what they want to get and it just doesn't work anymore. You have to invest into other sources for mana or for ailment immunity to be good, but then you also have to have damage. And I was thinking, what's the solution for this, right? And the only thing that I really felt like was the easiest solution without, you know, having more, let's say, like special influenced items that have extra stats on it that give us massive DPS, or telling people just buy cluster jewels, right? is pretty much giving us extra skill points. And I think that if some of the quests, because a lot of quests, people just don't do a bunch of the quests anyways, right? Because they just don't give skill points, right? So one solution for this would be just add more skill points to the tree, or for people to do like when they're questing, so they are able to actually get more damage at the end of the day. Even though like they nerfed the damage almost by half, but didn't give us like a new like you know how in a heist they gave us a new trinket, right? They gave us a new trinket, but the trinket only works in heist if they give us a new item slot, right? Like they gave us, I'm just gonna say toe ring for example, okay, a new ring slot. That would be amazing, right? Because then we could be like, okay, we lost a lot of damage here. We get this ring, like an extra toe ring slot or an earring slot, whatever the case may be, right? Just an extra like something that's new for Expedition, and it doesn't even have to roll over to the next league, but just to give us another source of a tool to make up for the damage and things that we lost. Because if someone doesn't care about playing the new league mechanic, or if they don't care about any of the new skills in the league, right? And they just want to play like that one build and they feel like it's too nerfed, they don't really have like a huge incentive to play. They're just like, I'm just going to go continue playing on standard, which is really, you know, kind of sad because there's a new league. Why not play on the new league, right? But that's the way I see it. I think that giving us extra skill points with some extra quests to make up for some of the damage loss as well as the mana loss. Because like with the mana changes, you're going to need to invest a couple extra points into mana, like some type of mana nodes, or like mana reduction, or like gaining Arcane Surge after you spend a certain amount of mana, or whatever the case may be. You need other sources of it, and to get that with skill points would be an excellent source of being able to do it, and it still kind of, you know, allows for more creativity too. And that also brings me up to my next topic of like, because they nerfed a lot of things, a lot of people say that like my creative builds are completely ruined. I can't do these weird things. Technically, I feel like you can almost do anything in Path of Exile as long as you're willing to put in the time and effort into it. You can definitely do it. But another thing that I did want to mention with the game is like visual clutter is a big thing. If you look at this example, this is we're doing like the Guardians here with Maven, and visual clutter, I'm playing a Holy Relic build with zombies. Look at how many like things are on the screen. I can't even see the enemy half the time. It would be really nice to have an option to highlight enemies, specifically bosses, in just like all red, like an outline, so you know when they're doing their move. Or if like, you know, Phoenix is doing their like move where they're slamming on the ground, you can see it, because some builds, there's way too much visual clutter and clarity is just non-existent when you're playing certain builds. So I feel like that could be something that could be addressed. This doesn't really have to do too much with the topic of like, you know, what happened with the game in terms of, you know, it's just a minion build. Minion builds are just kind of like that. But again, most people won't be able to get to the end game and be able to complete content. Again, going back to the same thing I mentioned, 0.1% of people can even complete Cyrus. So making all this new content for like these new 4 bosses, that's awesome. I love it. But if most people can't experience it, do you think that that is where you want to push the direction of where you're creating content for the game? Is it for that 0.1% of players? Because most of the 0.1% of players with all of these nerfs, they're just kind of unaffected by it. Like, I'm not even feeling the nerfs right here at all. Like, you could tell me that we haven't nerfed anything, and I would believe you. Like, just by looking at this gameplay in particular, I'd be like, okay. But, like, if you were to say we nerfed damage by 50%, we made mana costs, like, a lot more, I wouldn't be able to tell you from this gameplay. And from the Flash changes, I'd say that was awesome. So I think that they need to try to think about the average player that does not get a 6 league. The average player that does not get to the point where they can even do red maps. They get stuck on white maps, or they don't even get to maps because they can't even complete the first few acts because the game is too hard. I feel like the campaign difficulty is totally fine for me, but, you know, I've been playing this game for a really long time. I know lots of ins and outs. I know, like, you know, what to kind of scale, but an average player isn't going to be able to throw their things into POB and get, like, the perfect stats, min-max. Like, they're not going to know exactly what to do, and that's where there's a disconnect, I would say, from the average player to the player that's like the 1%, because the 1% is kind of unaffected by these changes, and they're the ones that are going to be able to actually do your new content. But in terms of like what happened to the game, I feel like they want to make this game very hard. There's going to be a new hard mode, that they're going to be experimenting a lot of newer things. So maybe perhaps that is the area where I think more of these changes should have went into. I'm talking about the mana changes, the huge damage changes as well as the ailment like changes, are being immune to certain things in the game. One thing that I noticed with this league, there are so many slowdowns. We got chill, we have like the vines that attach to you, we have the spiderwebs, we have maim, hinder, freeze, temp chains. There's many more, but like those are the things that I'm like, when a new player asks me, like, yeah, I keep on getting slowed down, but I'm immune to like freeze and chill, like you told me to get, like, because I mostly recommend people to get wanderlust in the very beginning, so you don't have to deal with that mechanic, because being frozen is basically death, especially when you're going to maps and you like click on like a chest and it's like freezes you when activated, and like, yeah, you can get a flask that like helps out with that. That's another thing I want to talk about briefly, but at the same time, a newer player is like, they're like, you know, busy doing their things. They're not going to be like, they might not even have the flash charges up, right? I don't really like the flash changes for like, you can't preemptively be immune to freeze. And then like, normally what I would do is I would activate my flask that gives me freeze immunity, then open up the chest that's unidentified, versus, oh, let me identify the chest, make sure it's not frozen, and then get frozen, and then immediately be able to push the button, make sure I have my flash charges up, right? So I feel like that is very difficult, because your reaction time needs to be, like you gotta be used to playing with a macro on like hardcore to like log out to be able to pop your flask fast enough to be immune to whatever, right? Before the changes were like 1 second where you're immune to corrupted blood, and I felt like that was a terrible change, but now it's 4 seconds. That's better. It is still in the right direction, but for me, I'm just gonna get like a jewel and corrupt it so it has immunity to corrupted blood. But a lot of people, they might not be able to access that. That might not be playing, so if they're playing solo self-found, they're not going to know to get that, or like, you know, whatever the case may be. Or they might not be able to get it as easily, obviously. And that's something that can be kind of difficult. So I would say overall, the reason why people are upset and what happened is they made the game a lot more difficult without giving us some sort of like extra solutions or some sort of extra item slot to make up for some of those things. You can see that bleeding just destroys this build. But nonetheless, that's my thoughts on this league. And I'm curious to know what your guys' are down below. How would you fix this area over here? Do you guys think the game is totally fine? For me, I feel like in terms of the mana changes, I was fine on my elementalist, but on my like melee build, oh, it was really rough leveling. So depending on your build, you might not have even noticed these things. That's why I figured now would be a good time, now that I've played lots of different builds, and I've kind of, at this point, I'm kind of like finished with the league. I'm good. I'm gonna wait for the next league. We're gonna be playing Diablo 2 Resurrected here very soon as well. But I'm curious to know what you guys would have for a solution as well, because a lot of times people bring up, you know, what the issue is and how would you solve it. I honestly think adding just more passive points through the quest, we get another like 10 points. Yeah, you can get much better ailment immunity. We can get extra damage, and we still would technically, in a lot of cases, would be about the same with an extra 10 nodes, especially if we did invest like 3 or 4 of those into ailment immunity or other sources of like mana. Because remember, we got to make up for mana, we got to make up for damage, as well as a lot of builds want to be ailment immune, at least to freeze. That's the main one. Like shocked, yeah, ignite can be kind of rough sometimes too. But I've noticed that, and like hinder, maim, all those things as well. Like you can get some on the Pantheon, but like a lot of people are just getting, you gotta corrupt this, like all these items need to be corrupted. Like it just requires so much min-maxing to get your build up, at least right now. That's the way I feel about it, and I think that most people do not have hundreds and thousands of hours to spend every single league. But that's just kind of what Path of Exile demands, and you know, it's a little bit different than other action RPGs, and that's okay. And I think they want this game to be very difficult, and to be like that game where like, oh, you can beat it, you know, you're awesome. And I get that. I definitely get that feel when a lot of times they're talking about things. They're like, well, you know, we want this game to have like this identity, and that's maybe what they want. But you know, at the end of the day, in terms of business, my suggestion for them is make it more accessible, at least in the early game, for those newer players to be able to get them to be able to do at least Cyrus and Shaper. At least I feel like that's where I want the player base to be. But anyways, that's my thoughts. You can let me know yours down below. But thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. If you're new here and do want to see more Path of Exile as well as other gaming stuff, because action RPGs are one of my favorite genres. We got more stuff from last epoch. They just added a new act, as well as Diablo coming out very soon for the Diablo 2 Resurrected, and we'll be giving you guys gameplays and builds on that as well. But anyways, take care, guys, and I'll catch you on the next video. And I'm out. Peace.